Hello and welcome to County Board Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell, and this is our monthly look at the recent actions by the County Board and what they mean for you, your neighborhood, and our whole community. Joining me today from their homes are Arlington County Board Chair Libby Garvey and Board Member Matt DeFerranti. Libby and Matt, welcome to both of you. We are going to start off this morning with not just the latest on the coronavirus pandemic that's keeping us all right here at home, but also with some of the racial tensions and calls for police reform that are affecting not just our community, but the entire nation. But first, let's take a look at phase 2, where we are right now of reopening.
Well, it means we're opening up just a little bit, and I appreciate you putting these both these pandemics together. Because frankly, I think we talk about COVID as a pandemic, and frankly, the whole racism is really a chronic pandemic we've been dealing with. They kind of go together. It does make it for a very challenging time right now. So things have opened up. You can go now from 10 people to 50, but you still have to do the social distancing if you can, and you need to wash your hands and wear coverings. We did a lot to, we have something called TOSAs, temporary outdoor seating areas for our restaurants, and really trying hard to make it so our restaurants can, before they were doing carry out and delivery, and now they can do, we call it dining in outside, which is kind of a little bit of a contradiction, but we're doing a lot to try to help our local restaurants. They can use the sidewalk more, parking lots, and we have a very quick permitting process. They still have to put in an application and we check it through, but we're working very hard to be responsive and do it quickly. And I'm just delighted by, I live right by Arlington, and going by the other night, and lights were on outside, and there were people eating outside and visiting, but not too close. They were separated out. And it was just great to see. It was just great to see. So what are you seeing, Matt?
Well, I'm noticing the same thing. Masks there's a lot of people almost everyone I see is really following and keeping their masks. This is safer at home. So there's some opening. We're 30%, we're going to 30% occupancy in gyms. We have our dog parks open. These are big steps in the daily lives of everyone. And by appointment, of course, you can get a haircut. These are things that matter in people's lives. And I've seen folks being disciplined about phase 2. We're going from minimum of 10 people in a setting to closer to 50, but really we have to keep thinking of that discipline, because we've seen other states where there's jumps in infections. And so I really think of this as phase 1 was a tiny bit opening. Phase 2, there's more, but we have to be really careful because we know this is a disease that is so challenging for our whole community, and we have lost people to the disease. So phase 2 is more open, safer at home, but not fully, and keeping that discipline.
Yeah.
Now, on that end, I would say, just what are the challenges that you are seeing? I know we have had reports of perhaps some larger crowds gathering, that kind of thing. What concerns are you seeing? What's your message to the community?
Well, I think Matt sort of put it this safer at home. Yes, get out, do some things, but people are such social creatures. I mean, we just love to be with each other. I'm even finding with these Zoom calls I get on, I haven't seen you for a while. Oh, it's so great to see you. And you just really feel that lack of social connection. So even when people are being thoughtful and think about it, and you start going out, all of a sudden you can throw caution to the winds because you forget about it. And that's one of the scary things for me. I think the more we get used to having masks, so that when you see somebody without one, it's kind of almost like they're not completely dressed. It's like, oh, and that we have to get that way as a culture, because I think this disease is going to be with us for quite some time. And as Matt was talking about, the last thing we want to do is have another flare up and have to go backwards. Exactly. And we really don't want to do it. So that's really my concern. I think Arlingtonians are smart. And I think a lot of people are kind of self-selecting. And I would say, and then Matt, I will toss it over to you because it's a generational question. I worry that younger people in particular, they're healthy. They've never really experienced a serious disease. They kind of, young people don't get sick and they don't worry about it. When in actuality, they really need to. So those are my concerns. I don't know what you're seeing, Matt.
Well, I think you said exactly what concerns me the most. We're so happy to see our friends, that if we see them, we want to talk to them and be closer than 6 feet. And sometimes that's just not appropriate. And so we see hotspots, and we have on our page a place where you can fill in a quick, make a quick note that there's a problem at X, Y, or Z location. But, responsibility is it's not just doing the right thing once or for a little while. It's sustaining that good discipline that we need. And so that's, I think, a real challenge. And, to make a difference on systemic challenges like the pandemic, and really systemic challenges that you identified well, Libby, the systemic challenge of racism, we need that sustained discipline and sustained responsibility, which is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, it has to become habit, Kara, and habits take a while to develop. They take a while.
And we're not going to be out of this one anytime soon. This is not going to be a habit we break anytime soon.
No, but I'm particularly glad about the dog parks, because I think that was a particularly difficult one. So
I think you are not alone in that feeling. I have a little Shetland sheepdog sitting around here who was very excited to see that happen. But Matt, since you touched on it, let's good segue there. Even as the county has started to see some signs of normal, so to speak, life returning, the murder of George Floyd at the hands of the Minneapolis Police Department sparked nationwide protests and urgent calls for police reforms, including right here in Arlington. And this, of course, was intensified by the ACPD's mutual aid response to the Park Police that brought our officers to the front lines of that violent dispersal of peaceful protesters in Lafayette Square outside the White House at the beginning of June. Let's talk a little bit about how our officers were in that situation in the process, in the first place, rather. Libby?
Well, as you say, we have a mutual aid agreement, and that we have mutual aid all around the region. And in fact, that's the only way this region survives. It's important to note, so every 4 years there's an inauguration downtown. There's no way that, the park police or the district police alone could handle that. So they call from all over. We come to help with that. We have the Marine Corps Marathon every year, not this year, but we have had it every year. And there's no way our police could manage all of the intersections and everything to make sure that goes safely. And we call on the park police. So there's a long-standing mutual aid agreement. It really goes back, the legal part goes back to 9/11. But we've been working on it even longer because we've seen too many, things that hit the region. We all talk about these separate jurisdictions, but we're all together in this. So that's how we came to be down there. The Park Service asked for support first on the Parkway because they were busy downtown. Then they said, we're having a hard time downtown. Please come and help us here. They were assigned to Lafayette Park. They went down first on Saturday. They were there on Sunday. And on Sunday, we're pushing, doing it properly. You didn't hear about any problems with it, moving people out of the park so that the fire fighters could get there to put out the fire in the church. So there was a lot going on. And then it all changed all of a sudden on Monday evening at about 6 o'clock. And our guys were there to help control the crowd, keep people safe. They had thought they'd been told they were going to put up a barrier. And it's been explained to me even that the barrier can be very helpful because when you've got protesters and police like nose to nose, tensions can kind of build up. If you can get a little bit of a separation, that really can help diffuse the situation, which is what you really want to do like that. So they were told they needed to get the barrier up. That's what they thought they were doing. None of our police heard anything about the president until they got home again. But of course, we got a different view of it because we're kind of at a very, 5,000 foot, 10,000 foot level. And once we saw the violence that happened and the president walking across, it sort of all came clear into what the picture was. And it was not a good picture, not anything we wanted to be involved in. Matt, I don't know. That's kind of summary.
I think you described what happened. It's important just to note that we're reevaluating our mutual aid. That doesn't mean we have to have that mutual aid with other adjoining jurisdictions so that we can, the marathon, 9/11, these are instances, and the inauguration, these are instances where there is a shared interest, an Arlington interest in mutual aid, but we have to reevaluate and make sure that we provide the right guardrails while also respecting the work that our police does. And I would say my experience with our officers has been positive. We have a fine police force. They were just being used for an improper purpose, and it was evident from the president's walk. That is not the purpose that would have been appropriate. And so I think it was the right step. And now we have to go into the important conversations of what do we do next? How do we reevaluate? And what are the appropriate changes to the way we're policing that will keep Arlington safe and be aligned with our values?
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out too, there's all this horrible video. If you look at it, I've learned more about crowd control. It's amazing what you learn. So a lot of what you saw from some of the other groups were really bad practices that really endangered people in the crowd. So if with something like they call it a flashbang, that's just kind of supposed to scare people and get them to run away. There's a wrong way and a right way to do that. The wrong way, which we sometimes saw, is lobbing it overhead. People get hurt that way. We don't do that. You wait until there's sort of a clear space, lob it in very gently down low, so all it does is make a noise, and people move on. So there are all kinds of things that we learned, and so people were watching really bad behavior, particularly that horrific picture of the park police beating the reporter. That was horrible, and then our guys get lumped in, but we behaved very professionally the whole time there. From what we've had lots of stories and things that we hear. And now there's a court case, so it'll all come out. But I'm confident that our guys and our men and women behave very professionally. And that then gets down to the locality, Matt, that you talked about here. How can we reassure our community here about policing? And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But everything we're talking about is so connected right now. The pandemic has made some things very clear about equity issues. Then you had the murder of George Floyd, which just was on top of it, and everybody is seeing it because they're home. And anyway, it's all connected, and this is a very turbulent time, very turbulent time.
Well, and as you mentioned, Libby, this has really kind of spurred that nationwide conversation, obviously going a lot further than even just the mutual aid agreements that we have, but the whole idea of police practices. How has that conversation been playing out in recent weeks here in Arlington?
Well, Matt, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. There's different components. All of us, each of us in our individual capacities, joined the Arlington-based Black Lives Matter. Libby was a host, as was Christian, and it was phenomenal in the sense that we saw officers participating as well, and it was very peaceful. You saw masks everywhere, so it was important to be at. And none of us wants to minimize the calls and the importance and the urgency of racial justice, and I guess I would say we also want to be clear about some of the facts. For example, Libby was alluding, the videos that you may have seen that are so disturbing, those are not our officers. Our officers were professional in that time and were reevaluating. So we have a lot of work to do. We've started with body-worn cameras, which we have received over 1,000 emails about police reform-related issues. Tomorrow, we're also having conversations that are going to be listening to the community's concerns, which we all think are essential. This is not the end, this is the beginning, and we are here to listen and engage with you to take our police and our community to the next step of fairness and safety.
Yeah, and I'm viewing this. This is really all of this is really an opportunity because we have, as Matt said, we've heard over like thousands, well over 1,000 emails from people, and it's really clear. Everybody feels passionate about it. It's really clear that a number of the people writing in, quite a few of them, it's maybe their first time. In fact, some of them even said this. It's their first time reaching out to the board. So it's an incredible opportunity to inform people. And we have, so for example, chokeholds. They have been forbidden in our code for a long time. So, we need to let folks know that. De-escalation. The reason that we were able to move forward so quickly on body-worn cameras, which is not, I think I'll take an opportunity, it's not like you can just take a cell phone here and tape it to your chest and hit play. It doesn't work that way, because what you have to have is the device that then has to feed the video into and then that has to be kept. And then on the other end, the courts have to be able to use that video and have the equipment to do that. So there's a whole lot that needs to happen. And we're going to match up our body-worn cameras that we're putting in with we're going to put in, we already have cameras in our vehicles, but they need to be upgraded. So rather than upgrade, we're just going to put the same system in, so it all will be seamless. And then I learned something, I don't know, Matt, if this was news to you. We're not only doing our police, but the manager recommends sheriffs, I get that, and fire marshals. Who knew fire marshals apparently carry lethal force? I had no idea.
I don't
They
think I knew
carry
that either.
guns. No. And so everybody who has, has the right to use legal force, legal right to do that in the community, needs to be wearing a body-worn camera, and we're going to see that happens. So it's a good opportunity to let people know. Our police have actually, they came to us wanting body-worn cameras some time ago, which is why and in fact, before times when we were in the middle of getting our budget going and we were having budget work sessions like we always used to do, one of the next ones we were going to get to before COVID hit was on body-worn cameras, and we were going to have a discussion about that. So the material was all ready and good to go. And then one more thing is, we're hearing a lot about mental health services and police, and actually our police are well trained, but they don't like to go on those calls either. So I think we're going to be able to have some good discussions. People understand exactly where it is that we are, which is not a horrible place. And we've got professional police and what we can do to make it better. So.
And then, of course, tying it all back then to what we were talking about earlier with the coronavirus pandemic, some doctors have warned that the peaceful protests that were taking place will then inevitably lead to a spike in COVID-19 cases. What are your feelings on that, and what have we been seeing here in Arlington so far?
All right, Matt, I talked a lot. I'm going to let you take this one, but I've got feelings about it too.
Sure. Well, I think they're absolutely fair concerns, but I was actually very heartened near the courthouse. There, people were socially distanced, and so it was spread down Wilson Boulevard. There was people were staying apart, and that is critical. I think it's important to honor just how strongly so many of us feel about the need for change in terms of safety for our Black and brown communities and individuals. And so fair concern, absolutely, on protests, but as we see people wearing masks and being careful about not being too close to other people, social distancing, I honestly believe we can do both stay safe and advocate for the values and smart changes that we absolutely need.
Yeah. And everybody was wearing masks. It's better when you're outside. So I felt pretty good about that. I will say that was one of the it's been kind of a grim time, and that was a wonderful event. And I found it was because of the social distancing because I was in the front of the group as we got across the bridge. By that point, Evan, who was heading it up too, set a really quick pace, which is easy if you're young and strong and have long legs. It was a little harder for me. And I also kept the mask on as much as I could, but sometimes I was having trouble breathing, so I'd move apart to take the mask off. But when we got across the bridge, I saw an empty bench, and I thought, all right, this is my time. I'm going to take a break because I want to get all the way to Lafayette Park. It was quite satisfying to get there a week later after our police had been, I think, misused down there. But anyway, I sat on the bench watching people come, and I was going to, I figured I'll let people come and I'll take up the rear, go from the front to the. Well, eventually I got up and kept walking because people were still coming.
Wow.
It was amazing. And to look down the reflecting pool, that was the one time I really teared up. I was there 50 years ago for a demonstration against the war. So I kind of go back over time. Looking down there and seeing the beautiful pool, the flags, the Washington Monument, the Capitol, and all these people, all from Arlington, and all there because they believe in what those buildings stand for. It was just, and totally mixed, mixed races, all different kinds of people, mixed ages. It was just, anyway, it did my heart good.
Good.
Yeah.
And on that note, that's a pretty good transition for us, but amidst everything that's been happening, of course, the work of county government and the board did need to continue. We will take a short break on that note, and when we come back, we'll take a look at the manager's proposed capital improvement plan, another budget dramatically altered by the COVID-19 pandemic. Stay with us. Welcome back to County Board Wrap-Up, Arlington Television's monthly look at the key actions taken by the County Board. I'm Kara O'Donnell, and joining me today are County Board Chair Libby Garvey and Board Member Matt DeFerranti. We're walking us through some of the actions the board took at its June meeting. Now let's start off with how the manager unveiled his proposed capital improvement plan, the budget for large infrastructure plans. It's normally on a 10-year cycle with updates every 2 years, but this one's a little different. Matt, we'll start with you. Can you explain this for us?
Yeah, it's a lot different, Matt.
Sure is. Yeah, and I think it's important to just note that the economic uncertainty that we've had, or the change that has been a result of COVID-19, has led to a different approach to our capital planning. And so the manager has brought forward a 1-year capital improvement plan this time. And that's very different from what we would have expected 5 months ago. But I think it's the right approach. What we have now is a proposed capital improvement plan. We have a month where there will be input. And so we have a public hearing on June 30th. We have a couple of work sessions. But the focus here has been on finishing existing contracts that have already started and really scaling down so we focus on a few key priorities. And one of them we know from approximately a year ago is stormwater response. We had that storm July 8th last year, and so many in our community rightly have called for some investments in stormwater to help keep homes safe. And so that's a significant component of the capital improvement plan. It's also we have those existing contracts. There is a little bit in there to help address body-worn cameras in this proposed plan. So I think we just have to understand the environment, the place we are, which is a very different world where we have to focus on doing well what we can for this year, and then we can come back to work on planning future years next year. So that's the capital improvement plan.
I told the manager it was a smart and strategic CIP, I think. And I just explained, so some people might think, oh, you're working on Lubber Run, or you're working on the pool at the aquatics facility at Longbridge. Yeah, because that's already paid for and done.
Right.
So we're going to keep that going. But once they are done, we're not going to open. We're not going to open right away because and then people say, well, why all the money's been spent on doing that? Well, actually, to have a facility like the aquatics facility or Lubber Run, there are a lot of people that keep those buildings running and keep them open for people. So that is an expense that we are not going to take right now because we really are not sure if we can afford it and what we can do. We are attending to some very important sort of maintenance things. There's a bridge across West Glebe that needs to be fixed soon. We don't want bridges falling down, so we're continuing to work on that. The folks around Lubber Run, there are some washed out bridges there in the park. We're actually going to continue and get those, get 2 of those done. One's already well underway, and there's one more we're going to do. So, we're doing all that, and then we'll come back and look at it. And then we've got a work session with our schools too, and on their CIP. So I'll be interested to hear from them what they're doing, because they've got a lot of rethinking to do as well. These are just very, as I said, turbulent times.
Right. And I mean, to that point, these turbulent times, unfortunately, are not going away anytime soon, as we've said. Do we see this as perhaps at least a near term, in the next few years, trend where we see these smaller, much more immediate focused CIPs rather than the 10-year plans that we've had in the past?
Well, I think Mark said he was hoping to bet, and I think there'll be a short one next in a year, right, Matt? I think, as you said, he'd come back in a year, and then after that, then we'd get back on the 2 years. So we'll probably have a bond and what we call an off year.
Okay.
But I think 2 years from now, then we're hoping to have a 10-year, get back on track.
Hopefully
let's
we'll
face it.
be all back to normal by
Well, I think it might be back to normal, but normal is not what we had before. And so we'll all find out what that is. Yeah.
All right. Well, from the macro impact of the pandemic to the much more humanitarian side, the board approved accepting about $20 million in federal CARES Act funding, about $400,000 of which will significantly expand food home delivery services to those in need. Let's talk a little bit about that program. How much of a need is there really here in Arlington County?
Well, before the pandemic, we were doing about 200 meals a week. And that went up to 250 in a matter of a few short weeks. And these are people who are older and homebound for Meals on Wheels. We also deliver to other folks. So we were doing about 6,000 meals a month, and now it's at 14,000 meals a month. We're also, of course, doing a lot of meals and food is being provided through a lot of other groups as well. There's the Coalition for Hunger-Free Arlington. A lot of the PTAs are stepping up. But we do have this CARES Act funding, and that there's and I think it'll keep coming to us because we've got this $20 million pot, but then we have to vote to make clear where it goes, and we have to account for it and make sure that we do that correctly. So that we can get reimbursed for it. So it's we're really redoing what we've been doing. One of the things I spoke to the chamber about, I realized, when people are asking how we're doing, one of the things that has been so heartening for me too to see here in Arlington is that we have a pretty good safety net. We might not have called it robust at times, but we had systems in place to help people with rent, to help people with food, to help people with health. And what we're doing, rather than having to reinvent, invent everything and make it up all at once, we're simply putting more resources in. So the Coalition for Hunger-Free Arlington came up because, we needed to coordinate more. We had so many different groups, but that's what I'm seeing. It's really, thank heavens we're the kind of community we are. And we had all of those systems sort of in place, and we just needed to grow them and stand them up more. Anyway, I don't know what you're newer here, Matt, but I know you've been very involved with our nonprofits as well.
Sure. Well, the initial numbers you mentioned on the 6,000 to 14,000 and increasing is our seniors who we have to value. There are seniors who are homebound, and getting food to them is sort of the measure of how good we are as a community. On the other side, we have worked with the Cooperative for Hunger-Free Arlington, has worked with our public schools to have 9 sites and seek to feed our students and our children even over the summer, which historically is one of the hardest times to make sure we meet the hunger needs that even Arlington has. So we're investing in our safety net. You mentioned hunger, there's health and housing. Those are really basic needs. And on health, we're continuing to invest in testing, and that's part of where some of our CARES Act federal funding is going. And then on housing, we're also continuing to put money regularly to prevent evictions through Arlington Thrive, which is another component of our safety net. So we both have the individual statistics to really show what we're doing to expand our safety net. But if you listen to each of us on the board and county staff leadership, we're focusing on those in need, and there are more of those in need right now.
Yep.
Well, on that note, we'll take another short break. And when we come back, we're going to take a look at a plan to expand the Career Center, as well as changes for one of the neighborhood's form-based code. Stay with us. Welcome back to County Board Wrap-Up, the show where we take a look at some of the key decisions the Arlington County Board takes at its monthly meeting. Joining me today to give some insight into the board's actions are Board Chair Libby Garvey and Board Member Matt DeFerranti. Libby and Matt, the board approved a plan to expand the Arlington Career Center at its June meeting. Now, what can you tell us about the future of the Career Center and then also of the Columbia Pike Branch Library that's on the same site?
Yeah. Well, the Career Center, that and the library is a real area where the schools and the county are cooperating quite a bit. And schools had quite a large plan for that area, and a lot of discussion happened about it. And then when it all came down to looking at what it was going to cost and COVID hit, they realized they had to kind of put that on pause. But they do still need more seats. So we've been talking with them for some time about the library there and repurposing one floor of it so they can get about 150 more seats for students in that area. Unfortunately, to do that, we've got to close the whole library for a little while that construction happens, about 3 months, if I'm remembering correctly. And there's a lot of concern in the area that the library is going to be closed because that is a very well-used, well-loved library, and people depend on it sometimes for their, having computers and internet. Of course, right now it's closed anyway. Unfortunately, we had a little discussion with the schools folks at our meeting. They're closed now. Couldn't you be doing it now? But apparently, actually, we're part of the issue because in order to redo it, we got to get the books and what we've got in the library out of the library. And then, of course, we'll have to put it back in. So it looks like it's going to be closed for about 3 months. I think they were going to start in August, Matt, if I recollect correctly. And then they're going to consolidate we will consolidate the library on the ground floor and keep providing those services. And on the second floor will be school space. So it's an area of cooperation that's been affected quite a bit by COVID and the economy.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
Sure. I'm glad you touched both on the cooperation we're seeking to do, and we are very mindful of how important that library is to the community. But we are in a period where the libraries are closed, and so we'll hope that work can get done as soon as possible, and we can also meet the expanded student capacity needs that we know we have as a community and that we have to address.
There are some libraries nearby, and I think we're looking at maybe doing a bookmobile or something that can help. But of course, that's not the space with the computers and things. So we'll continue actually to see if there's some different ways we can support it and see what's happening with libraries in general by the time we get there.
Now, I do know the school board's considering some alternatives to this particular expansion. How sure are we that this is the plan that's going to go through?
The library, I think we're pretty darn sure of because they've got the students. They have to put them somewhere. Mm-hmm. And of course, how they're going to do that with social distancing is another whole issue, but that would call out for more space rather than less. So I'm pretty sure they're going to do that. They're looking right now, I think, at doing what we call relocatables. Some people call them trailers. Mm-hmm. More of those still on the parking lot while they try to accommodate the students and figure out what to do next.
All right, we will wait to see on that. And also along Columbia Pike, we had some proposed amendments for the Columbia Pike form-based code. What can you tell me about that?
Sure. So this is an example of the listening that we need to do with our community is a key part of what we've been trying to do in this difficult time. So we have taken the form-based code proposal that came to us on Tuesday and acknowledged that there's a small gap that we need to address to make sure we're asking for resources for affordable housing on the commercial nodes, commercial locations inside the form-based code. And so we advertised to go forward with consideration of that part of the form-based code revision in July. But we had heard a lot of feedback from a number of stakeholders with respect to changes to the residential part of affordable housing financing and affordable housing as a part of development. And that we really had heard some concerns. And so we delayed that consideration till October so that we can, in this time where we're all on Zoom and Microsoft Teams all the time, and that is a good way of connecting, but we felt we really needed that additional time to really think through that component of the form-based code. So I think it was the right step to listen to our community's concerns and work to get it right as we make those changes in October and November.
Yeah. Columbia Pike presents one of these real needs to balance for government. So on the one part, you've got affordable housing you want to preserve and maybe increase. That's important. And on the other hand, you want to revitalize the Pike and get it to be a healthy, thriving commercial area as well, and residential area. So, there's this balance back and forth about what we're doing. And I'll just, so folks, one of the things I learned when I got on the county board some time ago, I hadn't heard RTA, with request to advertise. New concept to me. So we are advertising, all the information's out there, and we're saying we're going to talk about it at this time. So as Matt said, for the commercial area, we're pretty comfortable with that. We'll talk about it, decide in July. Although we can always decide not to decide, which we have on occasion done when things get really complex. And then on the other, with the residential, and that's an issue of, how affordable should it be? That's going to be put on into October, and there's lots of times for people to talk about it in many ways, and hopefully we'll have a really good discussion by the time we get to October.
All right. Well, that brings us, it feels like we can leave it right there. That will bring us to the end of another County Board Wrap-Up, where each month we take that deep dive into some of the County Board's key decisions. Libby and Matt, thank you both very much for joining us today during these very busy and strange times. I'm Kara O'Donnell. Join us again next month for another County Board Wrap-Up.